Hi, you're listening to Defend Your Time, brought to you by Untinue. I'm your host, Chris Taylor. This is the podcast where we help you get stronger security, more value, and fewer headaches out of your Microsoft security investments. In this episode, I'm joined once again by Microsoft security expert Daniel Morris, along with Sam McHugh. I'm really excited about today's episode. Daniel and Sam are going to talk to us about their approach to security assessments, and they'll highlight one recent engagement where they uncovered $1 million in cost savings for the customer. Now, Daniel and Sam have gone through countless security assessments together, and what they've told me is consistently, predictably, no one, no matter how sophisticated, ever seems to have it dialed in 100% perfectly. That's because Microsoft security licensing is complicated. In fact, it's why we started this podcast. We've looked and we cannot find real substantive, helpful content to support security teams who want to get more out of their Microsoft investments. So if this topic is relevant to you, I encourage you to subscribe to the podcast because over the coming weeks, we are going to be dropping a series of episodes focused on Microsoft security. And in each episode, we'll bring in subject matter experts and we'll deep dive into a specific feature or use case. We'll talk about identity, cloud, DLP, endpoint device management, you name it. So Sam and Daniel, $1 million in cost savings, something you helped this customer achieve in large part through tool reduction. But more than that, you help to give this customer a deeper understanding of their security ecosystem, how the tools needed to be configured to work effectively, how they needed to work in concert with one another. So thank you for being here. Let's dive in.
Yeah, appreciate it. And thanks for inviting me to take part. I tell these stories all the time because I think everybody that approaches us, given our Microsoft focus, is in this. I've almost seen nobody who can say, oh, we've got everything dialed in. And, certainly when we talk to certain customers, what they own, how they came to own it, we almost are always finding that confusion. There's, a lack of knowledge about, what each tool is that they own and what it compares to so that they can even start that simplification journey. So, had the privilege of being part of this and kind of like watching Daniel do his thing with this specific client. And again, very, very sharp client, knew the space and knew the risk sort of vectors that they needed to tackle. This exercise came out of sort of pushback from the parent org to actually leverage their E5 licensing beyond, just a few specific tools. That was one of the first times we did that exercise because usually we're talking about security and risk, but this certainly approached it from, something that was more helpful from a financial perspective. So, do you recall when you kind of created this exercise, like, was it just born out of a lot of conversations where you saw this confusion?
One of the ways that we came up with this was just because of multiple conversations happening at the same time. Being able to deliver an ROI for a customer, understand what was actually in their license, what tools and utilities are they currently using, and by far as Microsoft's not always the best in every category, but really getting down to the comparisons of how they're using a tool today versus what the features are in Microsoft, because there's a lot of arguments about other products and tooling compared to Microsoft until you actually get down to that granular level in comparison to make sure that those products actually line up, or maybe they didn't realize a feature was actually in there. And we came across this a lot, not only with those discussions about how they can save money through using Microsoft products, but also the comparisons to how long is it going to take me to deploy this, or how long do I need to plan on putting this in my environment? What is the task that I need to put at hand as far as what prerequisites do I have? What team members do I have? So over time, we just built it into one big roadmap. And over the course of about 5 or 6 different customers, this actually came about to being one full function flow. We had done this with multiple clients and just helped them along the journey and stuff, from either high level roadmaps or actually getting into granular details of doing the deployment, so that it was easier to build it into one function.
When I see people's reaction to actually taking your advice, right? When we got down to the understanding point and the comparison, and specifically Varonis or Cyber Angel, like, and some of these tools that the CISO was talking very specifically about the use cases, it wasn't dollars and cents anymore, right? You coupled that with your security knowledge so that he knew that if he advocated for the removal of this tool, or even, I think you even recognized they weren't even implementing those other tools appropriately.
So with the example that you're bringing up, Sam, it was very important because with Varonis, they had purchased Varonis and it was costing them almost $200,000 just for Varonis itself per year. They never actually implemented it. When we got down to the granular level, they were trying to use it for information protection and they never put it in place. So when we started discussing the functions and features and they went back to ask what functions and features were actually being used inside the org, they realized that they were paying for a tool for the past 2 to 3 years that actually cost them as much as the Microsoft license itself that they were going to be purchasing. Being able to help guide customers to understand not only what's available in the license, but also making sure that they understand what their security posture should be, even from a third-party tool source, and making sure that it's actually properly configured or that they've actually had somebody go in and review it and set it up properly and not just their team and rely on somebody internally is very important because at the end of the day, your security relies on those tools. If those tools are not set up correctly, then you're apt to fail. My goal through any of these is actually to educate the customer and help spread the wealth of knowledge, because it's not just for me to know or somebody on my team to know. This is actually something that I like helping people. I like actually giving them information and providing them with how to do things or what they should be looking at or changes in process that they should have internally. With those products like Varonis, where they were trying to use it for information protection and didn't have it fully configured, and then they realized that they were paying for an E5 license for the Microsoft 365 E5 license that includes Purview. They were able to quickly shift and realize that not only with them moving to Defender for Endpoint and adopting other pieces, they were actually able to adopt that across the board from one license stack to remove some of the ad hoc licenses that they had. One of the big issues that they were looking at is that the original purpose of Varonis was, and some of the other things like Cyber Angel, were actually to do best of breed, and they were not even best of breed tools at the time that we actually got to talk to them. They were best of breed a couple of years before, but they were looking at multiple panes of glass that their team couldn't even control or manage because they were so short-handed and staffed.
Well, what I love about this specific example is one monthly meeting. We were showing some of the alerts that we brought to their attention, and he was digging around in Sentinel. He's like, well, where's this one? I saw this alert. And we're like, well, we didn't bring it up because it was automated. Like the CASB solution, the AD and MDE all worked in Congress to actually just solve it without a human being needed. How do you also show how the tools connect instead of one best of breed tool here, one best of breed tool there?
So the way that we actually show that is if they have that curiosity of how they actually work together, the goal is to actually, not only from the SE standpoint of having them see what our MDR solution does and they kind of get an idea of everything flowing into Sentinel, but it's also through other engagements or workshops to actually help them understand how these pieces actually wrap together. So when we start talking about Microsoft as a service, as far as looking at the security aspects of it, of course, for us at Ontenu, it's very important for MDE to be in place, right? That's our EDR solution that we're truly looking at. But for us to be able to show a client how Defender for Endpoint, Defender for Identity, and Defender for Office, along with Defender for Cloud Apps, integrate together, not necessarily directly, but through Sentinel itself, and being able to correlate those logs and through the automatic remediation or automatic investigation and remediation capabilities that are within Microsoft security products, being able to have a lot of that come out straight away, especially based on the policies that are configured. One of the things I would actually tell a lot of people when they're looking at these products is not only do they connect together to make an extended detect response setup, but it's also based on the configuration that you put in. That's with any tool. So it doesn't matter if you're looking at CrowdStrike, Sophos, any of those pieces, but with having the discussions that we do through not only the ROI, but the comparisons, if we're talking about a product like Sophos compared to Defender for Endpoint, there's going to be a lot of discussions about Defender for Endpoint not having the ability to encrypt a device on as far as the endpoint itself. That Sophos has that ability, but the difference is where is that found? So it's actually found within Intune. So being able to guide customers on where things are in the product stacks and how they actually work together, that's different from our normal talk tracks of you just need this EDR solution, you just need an Active Directory solution, you need some internet. Let's get you set up from here. This is more of a discussion on where things are actually found that you're trying to use now and what's important to them as a business, and being able to guide and direct them to those pieces.
In this specific example too, and I've seen it every time, another illuminating thing you do is the order. It might take 6 to 18 months, depending on the commercial factors and then the risk coverage. I mean, all kind of come into this recipe of how to do this right.
Yeah, and Sam, those are good points to bring up. So when we talk about the order of how to deploy these products, it's not just do you deploy them or do they make sense for the business, right? At the end of the day, we have to know when they're renewing those products. Like you said, we have to know how soon before the renewal happens if they're going to actually deploy something like Purview, for example, to replace another DLP solution. If we're going to take and deploy that out, we have to know how soon in advance we should actually start that exercise, so that it's not coming right with the renewal, that there is an overlap, so that if there is policies that they already have built out that they need to mirror, they can actually do that. Or if they're following under a regulatory compliance that requires them to have logs for a certain period of time, whether it's we're looking at another SIM like Splunk, for example, which is what I call the kitchen sink nachos, right? That's where everything gets dumped in and just nobody knows what they're actually pulling out. The goal is to actually help them understand what's truly needed for your regulatory compliance. When is your Splunk renewal coming up? And then how can we help you get there sooner? So if you need 3 months worth of logs, let's do it 3 months in advance, so you have an overlap of 3 months of logs compared to your current Splunk setup. If you need something more along the lines of 6 months of logs that are sitting in cold storage, let's take and go on and start this. If you need to do it by August, let's start it in sometime around March, so that we can actually get those cold storage logs started for you. And there's an overlap of that, so you're not missing the capabilities that's there. But something like Defender for Endpoint replacing another EDR solution, Defender's great about giving you the ability to run it in passive mode. So being able to actually discuss that with a customer and help them understand that, if we go on and roll out Defender for Endpoint, maybe second, we get Intune started first, get you help with compliance policies and being able to encrypt the local devices, and then rolling out Defender for Endpoint second, so that we can control all those policies through Intune itself. But start off with a passive setup. That way we can actually take and plan in time the removal of the other EDR service with their renewal date, so that they actually have enough time, not only with the renewal date, but with the cancellation date. So there's a difference in those 2 dates, making sure that they understand that they might have to send something 6 months in it, or 3 months in advance, or 2 months in advance versus 30 days, so that they can actually take and cancel out of that contract on that date. So if they're moving off and at the end of October, we would start 1st of September with rolling out Defender for Endpoint, going and get that done, get some of it baselined, but still in passive mode, and have it ready for policies to be swapped over, make sure things are mirrored, but being able to put every one of those pieces in order based on those renewal dates, so that they're not taking and feeling like they're having to rush through it. One of the things that I've seen from a lot of customers is they feel like everything has to be adopted right now. They never look at it from a long-term plan, and the goal from this exercise is to actually help them understand it's a longer-term plan. It's not a right now. The roadmap actually gives them a visual of how much they're stacking up on their team and how much they're trying to put pressure on their team, where it may be 2 to 3 guys that's actually doing the full-time deployment. And when you add that up, that's another tech debt that's actually coming in, not just from the ROI standpoint, but just from a personnel standpoint.
That idea that I bought the whole cow, I should be using the whole thing. And it's like, if there's 15 key pieces of your E5 or your Microsoft security investment, if you deploy 4 and simplify environment, you're already at a win. And then everything from that should be planned and on the roadmap and considered based on bandwidth renewals. I mean, if you want to call out an example, like you call out certain non-Microsoft tools, be like, now that I understand what you're looking for, don't get rid of that one thing. Let's review that 6-12 months from now at the next Ignite, and we'll see if Microsoft has really caught up. And it's great to see how much they caught up, but that I've seen also helps the client really understand that this is a holistic approach, not a 100% pro Microsoft everything approach.
Yeah, and there is tools depending on how they're actually being used that I will tell the client to hold off for a year. You're right, Sam. And it really depends on the situation. Depends on how they're actually using it. If there's more reporting that they're actually trying to pull from those the tooling that they have based on whether it's a CEO that's asking to see certain reports on where they're at from a compliance standpoint, or where they're at from a security standpoint, or they're having to report back to a board to actually show what's actually been happening for the past 3 months. There's certain times where I'll actually tell them to leave some of those tools in place. One of the times that I've actually seen that play out is actually where we had a customer that had everything under the sun. When you come to security tooling, they were definitely using a bunch of different tools. They had multiple reports done. They had done their own detailed analysis of what all they were using. They'd had Microsoft come in and do an analysis of what could be replaced from a license standpoint. And then we come in and they were talking to us for our MDR service, and they brought me into the conversation because they needed some help deploying out Defender for Endpoint. But we went on and did the exercise with them to do a strategy review, not knowing that they had already had 2 others performed. And at this time, when we went through, one of the products that they were actually using a lot was KnowBe4. And one of the arguments for KnowBe4 for email security awareness training is that the videos are very short. They're very short, direct, to the point. It's 2 minutes of glory instead of 15 minutes of fame, right? So you're taking and actually coming in with a lot shorter snippets, getting straight to the point. You're not wasting a whole lot of end users' time. And it's something that I've actually used in the past as far as using KnowBe4 and Wombat. So being able to direct people to, maybe hold on to that piece, but adopt the rest of Defender for Office, other than the spam features and stuff that's from KnowBe4, and make sure you go back and validate your license, make sure that you're not overpaying for that service, that you're only paying for this part, not the rest of the snippet, and getting them directed on that. But at the end of that conversation, when I brought that back up, they were like, you gave us more information in just the matter of a couple of hours spending time with you in an ugly spreadsheet than Microsoft or even our own analysis did. And we have a better roadmap than what we had before, because now we know a product that we can actually keep. We don't have to worry about the rest of the tools based on what you're saying. We can go in and adopt these. And we actually ended up helping them do most of their deployment.
To that point, I mean, I'm thinking back, I saw with one client, I don't know if it was you or Ryan, they wanted to still get stuff out of KnowBe4, but they didn't realize they just hadn't turned on MDO.
Yeah, there's been a mishmash of either those that have everything together and actually understand what's in the license. To kind of give you an example, there was one college source that we were working with that they actually just implemented upgrading their license to the A5. So the A5 and the E5 are very similar in the product that they actually have. One of the things that's actually was missed by them, they had been adopting everything from the A5 security license itself. But at the end of the the time frame that we actually discussed, they had not done a CASB solution, and they didn't realize that Purview was available to them now in the A5 license, which is actually one of the pieces that was actually on their list of a need to fill, right? So they needed to put in DLP policies. They needed some things around insider risk and some other pieces. But what we've actually found is not only do these people sometimes come in and Microsoft doesn't do a great job of showing you everything that's actually in the licenses itself. It's kind of hard to actually find. Sometimes they don't realize what all needs to be configured because the documentation's not always either updated or it's not complete. It's the documentation for Microsoft as far as the Microsoft Learn is really to give you a kind of a beta test. You're supposed to go out there and deploy it, see how it works, and then you're supposed to refine it to your own standards as far as what you're actually deploying. And we've seen others, kind of like the one that you were talking about, Sam, where they have a product like Know-Before, but it's not integrated into Defender for Office correctly, or they think they turned on the connector and they never actually completed it. So all these people are hitting for spam emails and they're never going to the blacklist. They're continuously getting those emails and the alerts are still coming through, and they're working about 3,000 alerts a month for just emails that could have been auto remediated. The goal for us is to take and help them understand what all is actually here. And then when we get to these conversations, kind of like a email security, for example, when we start talking about Defender for Office and somebody's deployed out Defender for Office, but they say it doesn't work well for them, so they're going to go back to Momcast. Well, we start asking questions about what they've deployed, and they go, well, I deployed the baseline settings. Well, the baseline settings don't cover everything that's actually in the policies. So we need to get a little bit harder with those policies and actually take and refine what we're doing and not just go for the straight easy source. It's not the Staples easy button that we just press and everything's delivered automatically. It's going through and actually getting the proper policies in place, getting the proper setup, going through each one of those policies, whether it's the threat analytics or whether it's the anti-spam, anti-malware, settings to make sure that they're actually set and configured correctly. And then if there's any integrations to third-party tools, making sure that you follow those steps 100% to make sure everything's actually coming across so you can minimize the time that's taken on your team. We don't do all of that through the strategy review, but we do help guide you. So if you are looking at something like, Momcast from a email security standpoint, we can actually help guide you on that, because a lot of things that's not protected from Momcast is actually your own Microsoft.com email address. Guiding people to actually understand that needs to be protected as well, because it's easy enough for me to connect to that email address without connecting to your domain. Just being able to breach a password. So helping people understand that and kind of go from there is what our goal is.
I definitely love one outcome being this exercise, but also the Defender user group, which is a wonderful community, because I can see people have all these questions and they're kind of starving for the resources. So love kind of going back to some of these examples, for the sake of this conversation. And again, hopefully, people raise their hands and accept help from you, because I know it shouldn't be so hard to find. I love the speed at which people get to claim a victory once they get someone like you or Ryan or a Dusty or whoever to expertly walk them through what the power is of these tools.
All right, Sam, Daniel, thank you so much. That was a great discussion. Thanks everyone for listening. At Ontinu, we work with companies who are looking to get more out of their security investments with Microsoft. Come talk to us. We'll do a full review. We'll build out a comparison of the current tools and practice and build you a full roadmap to help you achieve an ROI and get a better security posture. If you're interested in finding more, come visit us at ontinu.com. We'll leave details about Defender User Group, as always, at the bottom. And thanks very much.